This is about my brother-in-law's downfall, a cautionary tale of greed, betrayal, and karma catching up to people who think the grass is always greener on the other side. My brother-in-law married my sister over 20 years ago. Neither of them had much formal education, but he was always a hard worker. Through years of dedication, he built himself up from nothing to owning 3 large compounds and several private cars. Everyone in our family looked up to him as an example of how far determination could take you, even without a degree. The problem started when he met this woman from abroad at a business conference. She was everything my sister wasn't: university educated, worldly, and full of promises about opportunities in her country. At first, he tried to play it off when my sister discovered their relationship. He told her it wasn't anything serious, claiming he was just using this connection to find a way to travel abroad. He assured her that once he got there, it would be over. My sister, though hurt, tried to be understanding, but then things took a turn for the worse. The foreign woman started feeding him information about immigration requirements. She claimed that the only way for him to get permanent residency was through marriage, saying it was the law in her country. When my brother-in-law brought this up to my sister, she immediately knew something was wrong. She questioned why he would need to divorce her and marry this woman just to travel, insisting there must be other ways. My brother-in-law responded by calling her unreasonable, saying this was his only chance to build a better life abroad, and telling her to think about the opportunities. My sister reached out to other family members for help. We all tried to talk sense into him. She pleaded with him, reminding him that they had built their life together for 20 years, begging him not to throw it all away for someone he barely knew. I tried to reason with him too, asking if he had even verified any of this information, telling him it sounded like a scam. But he wouldn't listen to anyone. His mind was made up. He divorced my sister and married the foreign woman, convinced he was on his way to a better life abroad. That's when our uncle stepped in. He's always been the family's moral compass, and seeing my sister so devastated sparked something in him. He was also one of the few people who understood the legal system. He told us to let him handle it, saying what my brother-in-law had done wasn't just morally wrong, they could fight this in court. Our uncle meticulously built a case around every single property my brother-in-law owned. The court proceedings revealed how the foreign woman had been manipulating everything from the start. The judge's decision was swift and clear. 2 properties were awarded to my sister, and the 3rd property was put in trust for their children. The foreign woman's true colors showed immediately. As soon as she realized there would be no properties in her name, she disappeared back to her country, completely ghosting my brother-in-law. The aftermath was brutal. My brother-in-law lost everything: his properties, his cars, sold to cover legal fees, and even his job due to all the time he spent dealing with the chaos he created. Today he lives as a caretaker in the property held in trust for his children, barely making ends meet. He never got those immigration papers. He never traveled abroad. His foreign wife hasn't answered his calls in over a year. Recently, he tried crawling back to my sister. He begged her, saying he had made the biggest mistake of his life and asking for another chance. My sister told him that he had thrown away 20 years of marriage for a fantasy and that he had chosen his path and now had to live with it. I heard he's still managing the property where he lives, watching over what used to be his while his children finish their education. The foreign woman apparently remarried in her country, someone with actual wealth this time. My sister has moved on. She used some of the property rental income to take business management courses and now runs a successful small business. She's doing better than ever, proving it's never too late to rebuild your life. My dad, 64, has always been the type of person who would give you his last dollar if you needed it. That generosity was tested to its limits a few years ago when his cousin and her son took advantage of his kindness in the worst way possible. Back in 2016, my dad hit some really rough times. He had invested heavily in real estate, and when the market crashed, we nearly lost everything. But to understand why what happened hurt him so deeply, I need to go back to 2009. That year, my dad's cousin called him in a panic. Her son, who was in his early 30s at the time, was in serious trouble. There had been allegations that he killed someone in their village. While the police found no evidence and the case went cold, the deceased's family had sworn revenge. They were planning to kill him. Without hesitation, my dad agreed to help, saying the family had to look out for each other. My mom wasn't thrilled about a murder suspect moving in, but she understood the gravity of the situation. So my dad's cousin's son moved in with us in the city, far from the village. My dad didn't just give him a room, he gave him a whole new start. He helped him get a job at an insurance firm after his initial work at a restaurant. He never asked for rent, utilities, or grocery money. When we upgraded appliances, my dad let him take the old ones to give to his sisters who had moved nearby. When my dad retired a few years later, he even gave him $6,000 as a gift. The cousin's son seemed genuinely touched, saying he'd never received such a generous gift before and didn't know how to thank my dad enough. Then 2016 hit, and we struggled badly. Some days there wasn't even food in the house. To his credit, the cousin's son did help during this time, though he kept detailed records of every penny he lent us, and my dad always paid him back as soon as he could. Finally, in 2018, the real estate market improved. My dad managed to sell 2 properties for low 6 figures each. We were finally able to breathe again. My dad, being the generous person he is, gave his cousin's son another $6,000 as a thank you for helping during our tough times. That's when things went sideways. A few days after getting his thank you money, the cousin's son came to my dad with a business proposal and an itemized list. He explained that he wanted to start a pineapple and orange farm on his inherited land in the village and needed $29,000 to get started. He showed my dad everything he claimed he would need. When my dad pointed out how much money that was and asked if he had saved anything toward it himself, the cousin's son brushed it off. He just reminded my dad about the properties he'd sold for hundreds of thousands, saying this amount was nothing in comparison. My dad tried to explain that he had 4 kids in boarding school and was planning for their college but offered $3,000 to help him start. The cousin's son didn't take this well at all. He coldly told my dad that we'd see about his refusal and stormed out. 4 days later, his mother showed up unannounced. She burst into our house right after lunch and started screaming at my dad. She berated him about how he was treating her son, bringing up the hundreds of thousands from the properties and asking why he couldn't spare just $29,000. My dad sat quietly, but my mom, who doesn't take nonsense from anyone, had enough. She shouted back, reminding them that her son would be dead if my husband hadn't taken him in. She asked who else would take in someone suspected of murder, pointing out that he had lived with us for free for years and received 2 gifts of $6,000 each. The cousin tried to throw back that her son had helped us when we were struggling and then brought up how many times she had bathed and cared for my dad's mother when she had dementia. My mom shut that down immediately, reminding her that my dad had thanked her monthly with money and gifts. She then demanded that they get out of our house. The cousin's son continued living with us for several months after this, completely shameless, until he finally moved out on his own. He was nearly 40 years old at this point. My dad stopped allowing extended family to visit after this incident. Sometimes he still wonders what he did wrong, but I remind him that some people just see kindness as weakness. The cousin and her son still try to contact him occasionally when they need money, but he's finally learned to say no. Last month, we heard that the cousin's son tried to start his farm anyway with borrowed money. It failed spectacularly within 6 months, and now he's trying to convince other relatives to invest in his next brilliant idea. At least we're not on that list anymore. I bought my house about 3 years ago after getting a promotion at work. It was a perfect starter home. Not too big, not too small, and in a decent neighborhood. The previous owner was an elderly gentleman who had lived there for decades before moving to a retirement community. Everything seemed great until I met my next-door neighbor. The first week after moving in, I was getting my groceries out of my car when this woman came marching up my driveway like she owned the place. She immediately started talking about how she needed to discuss the driveway situation with me. When I expressed my confusion, she explained that she had an arrangement with Mr. Johnson for the past 15 years where she would use part of my driveway to back into her own. She justified it by saying her driveway was at an awkward angle, making it easier this way. She said this as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I stood there confused, still holding my grocery bags. When I asked for clarification about her wanting to use my driveway, she corrected me quite firmly. She said she already did use it and just needed me to park my car closer to my garage so she would have enough space to maneuver. She then told me of her schedule, saying she leaves for work at 7:30 a.m. and returns around 6 p.m. I was too stunned to say no. Plus, I figured being accommodating to my new neighbor wouldn't hurt. So I agreed, and for 2 years, I parked my car exactly how she wanted. I even started planning my schedule around her parking routine. If I needed to leave around the time she usually came home, I'd leave earlier to avoid any issues. Then last month, my mother had a fall. She broke her hip and needed surgery. I rushed to the hospital after getting the call at work, and when I got home at 11 p.m., I was exhausted. The hospital was an hour away, and I knew I'd need to go back first thing in the morning. So instead of backing all the way up the driveway, I just parked in front of my house. At 7:35 a.m., my doorbell started ringing nonstop. I opened the door to find my neighbor, still in her bathrobe, looking furious. She immediately started yelling about my car being parked wrong and complained that she was already late for work because of me. When I tried to explain about my family emergency and my mother being in the hospital, she cut me off. She rudely declared that she didn't care about my personal problems and demanded I move my car right away because she had an important meeting that morning. When I tried to point out that I've been accommodating her parking needs for 2 years, but it was actually my property, she became even more agitated. She brought up Mr. Johnson again, claiming he never gave her this kind of trouble and that he understood this was the only way she could park properly. I simply told her that I wasn't Mr. Johnson and this was my driveway now. She stormed off, got in her car, and spent the next 10 minutes attempting to back into her driveway without using mine. She ended up having to do a million-point turn to get in. That evening, she left a note in my mailbox threatening to report me to the Homeowners Association for disrupting the neighborhood's established parking protocols. I looked into it. There were no such protocols. She had just been taking advantage of an elderly man's kindness for years and expected me to do the same. The next day, I installed security cameras and put up no trespassing signs along my property line. She tried using my driveway anyway, so I had my lawyer send her a cease and desist letter. She went ballistic, started telling other neighbors that I was being unreasonable and trying to make her life difficult. After she started spreading rumors about me, another neighbor approached me and told me she had been doing the same thing to them. Apparently, she would use their driveway to turn around whenever she missed her own driveway, and she'd gotten aggressive with them when they complained. So we both filed complaints with the actual homeowners association about her harassment. Turns out she had multiple complaints against her from other neighbors too, but everyone had been too polite to make a big deal out of it. The association issued her a formal warning and she was forced to attend a mediation session. During the mediation, she tried to argue that she had historical rights to use my driveway because of her arrangement with the previous owner. The mediator shut that down pretty quick. She ended up having to take a driving course to learn how to properly maneuver her car, and now she parks on the street most of the time because she still can't figure out how to use her own driveway properly. She recently tried to sell her house, but her realtor had to disclose the challenging driveway situation to potential buyers. I heard she's had 3 sales fall through because nobody wants to deal with a driveway they can't easily use. She is now looking into having her driveway redesigned, which is what she should have done 15 years ago, instead of imposing on her neighbors. I still see her giving me dirty looks whenever I'm outside, but she doesn't dare use my driveway anymore. My mother recovered well from her surgery, and I now park however I want on my own property. 2 years ago, I found an injured baby squirrel in my backyard. I was working from home that day, and I heard this tiny squeaking sound coming from under my deck. The poor thing was barely alive, probably fell from a tree during a storm we had the night before. I couldn't just leave it there to die. I've always had a soft spot for animals. Growing up on a farm, I learned how to take care of all kinds of creatures. My parents taught me everything about rehabilitating injured animals, from birds to deer. I named the squirrel Peanut. Yeah, I know, not very original. After nursing it back to health, I realized I couldn't just release it. Peanut had become completely dependent on human care, and wildlife experts I consulted agreed it wouldn't survive in the wild. 6 months later, I found Fred, a baby raccoon, abandoned near a construction site. Same story. Couldn't leave the little guy to fend for himself. Before I knew it, I had two adorable roommates who brought so much joy to my life. I started sharing their daily adventures on social media. People loved seeing them play together, eat their favorite snacks, and just be their goofy selves. I had millions of followers who adored them. Everything was perfect until that horrible day in October. I was working in my home office when I heard aggressive knocking at my door. The government agent announced themselves as the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and demanded I open the door immediately. When I asked what this was about, another agent told me they had received complaints about illegal possession of wildlife and had a warrant to search the premises. Before I could even process what was happening, they pushed their way in. 4 agents in uniform started searching my house, while 2 others cornered me in the living room. I tried to explain that these animals couldn't survive in the wild, but one of the agents coldly told me that it was illegal to keep wildlife as pets in New York State and that they had evidence from my social media accounts. At that moment, I heard Peanut chirping from upstairs. One of the agents shouted that they had found them, announcing the discovery of both animals. I desperately tried to explain that they had never shown any aggressive behavior and were perfectly healthy, even mentioning I had records from the vet. The agent just ordered me to step aside, saying the animals needed to be tested for rabies. That's when it hit me. They were going to euthanize my babies. I tried to reason with them, pleaded with them to at least let me have them tested by a private vet, but they wouldn't listen. The next few minutes were a blur. They put Peanut and Fred in separate carriers. Fred was scared and making distress sounds I'd never heard before. Peanut was chirping frantically, trying to reach me. I shouted that this was insane, that they'd never hurt anyone, begging them to check my vet records. The agent threatened to detain me if I didn't calm down. I felt helpless watching them take away my family. I immediately started making calls to lawyers, to animal rights groups, to anyone who would listen. My social media followers were outraged. The story went viral. That's when things took an unexpected turn. Major news outlets picked up the story. Famous people started sharing it and criticizing the department. Even Elon Musk tweeted about it, calling it government overreach at its worst. The department tried to justify their actions by claiming they had received anonymous complaints about potential rabies exposure. But here's the thing, we managed to track down the source of these complaints. Turns out it was a woman we nicknamed Karen, a former neighbor who had moved away months ago. She had been jealous of my social media success and had been reporting me to various authorities for months. We found recordings of her ranting to anyone who would listen, claiming my animals could have rabies and that I was endangering the whole neighborhood. She kept demanding that someone needed to stop me, but we had proof, security camera footage of Karen trying to break into my backyard multiple times to gather evidence. She had been stalking my social media, making multiple fake accounts to report my content. The public pressure became intense. Protests formed outside the department's offices. Animal rights lawyers took up my case pro bono. We filed lawsuits against both the department and Karen for harassment and making false reports. The department tried to cover their tracks by quickly euthanizing my pets, but this only made things worse for them. Independent investigations revealed that they had violated multiple protocols in handling the situation. They had improperly reviewed the vet records I tried to show them, and they had no concrete evidence of any rabies exposure risk. Karen's involvement was the final nail in the coffin. She ended up facing criminal charges for filing false reports and stalking. The department officials who conducted the raid were suspended pending investigation. The head of the department was forced to resign. While none of this brought back Peanut and Fred, it led to significant changes in how the department handles wildlife cases. New guidelines were established requiring thorough veterinary evaluations before any drastic measures could be taken. I still miss my little ones every day, but their story changed things for the better. Now, when I look at their photos on my wall, I know their lives meant something. They exposed the broken system and helped protect other innocent animals from meeting the same fate. Last I heard, Karen is facing jail time and has become a social pariah in her new neighborhood.